Emily Pratt, not present.
First order of business, approval of the minutes of the January meeting. So move. And second? Good evening. No problem.
We'll note that Emily
We'll-
Pratt has
We'll
arrived.
note her presence. Thank you. And we're just getting to the minutes. Motion and second. Any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. New business. We have two ordinances that are being offered at this point for review. 23 PC 70 is text amendment for ordinance regulating the development of wind energy systems. And you should have a draft of that ordinance in front of you. Alice and Dee have worked diligently in putting these together. And I think the easiest way for us to proceed is to go through it page by page if everybody's had an opportunity to review them and note any questions or concerns that anybody might have. I'm wondering, Alice, if it would be best if you kind of gave us an overview of what we're looking at and issues or elements that you've looked at that you have any concerns with.
Well, first of all, the reason for this petition hearing is that we are being asked to come into compliance with the governor's recently enacted public act that addresses the siting standards for wind and solar in Illinois. These changes came about kind of unexpectedly. As the counties previously had the right to govern those decisions, the state has now taken it away. Unfortunately, that has left us in this position of having to set aside the two ordinances we worked on for the last 2 years, and we are now having to kind of start over again with what the state is requiring. I do apologize for not having drafts out sooner. Time has not been on our side for this. We are under the gun to have something in place by May 26th. And with our county processes, that means it would have to go to the county board this month so that they can hold it over for a month under their rules and vote on it in May. So that is why we are somewhat rushing to get to this point so that we can proceed with amending the text properly. Starting out, we can start with the wind draft. And I mean, essentially, they've added some new definitions, not anything too different than what we've seen in the past. Some of them are very similar to definitions that we had. They just have now different terms that they're associated with. We are required to have public hearings. This is required under the new Public Act, even though we are very limited in the say that we can have as far as the siting of these projects. We are still required under this new Public Act to hold a public hearing. The public will still be able to have their say. Unfortunately, depending on what their concerns are, there may be very little that the county can do to address their concerns. We are going to keep it as a special use in Lee County. This will require, again, a public hearing. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through and pick out what has changed. So essentially, the biggest change we come to in the wind draft would be our setbacks. Lee County was at 3.1 times the max blade tip height of the tower. Under the state's new rules, we are at 2.1 for any occupied community building, 1.1 times the height of the tower for participating residents, 2.1 for non-participating residents. And the rest of the setbacks stayed the same or consistent with what we had for Lee County as far as public right-of-way setbacks, overhead communication line setbacks, utility setbacks. This does include a setback for protected lands, fish and wildlife areas, preserve areas, which is what we've always honored in the past, but now it is specifically given its own setback. Does anyone have any questions up to this point?
Go ahead.
It might not be on.
Did I understand you correctly when you said that since our setbacks were 3.1, they are now 2.1? We can't go greater than, we can't be,
We can't be more restrictive than what the state has. So anything over 2.1 would be considered more restrictive.
got it.
And unfortunately, I mean, we could drop it down to 2, 1.5 if we wanted to, but we can't go any higher than that 2.1.
And that'd be the other direction.
Yes, and we would have no interest in reducing the setback any lower than 2.1.
Got it.
So
Okay, thank you.
under the rules, that's all we're allowed to
Okay.
do. Any other? Are you good? Under the public road use section, this is the language proposed by the what's that? I'm just gonna, oh, help him, sorry. This is the language that was put in the template. Dave Anderson, our county engineer, has expressed interest in keeping the former language he had under our most recent ordinances. It was the same for both wind and solar. It was language he drafted. And so we are trying to check with the state's attorney's office right now to see if there would be any issues with maintaining that same language. It's pretty consistent with what he had. It's worded a little bit differently. He had a few different requirements. So we're trying to see which way we can go with that. Communication analysis, that has stayed pretty much the same. As far as television, 911, radio, microwaves, things of that nature. There is also a complaint process that the public will still have access to for any issues related to communication interference. The noise levels, this has stayed the same from what we had in our current ordinances, and we will remain consistent with Illinois Pollution Control Board. The AMA, and we have required the AMA with both wind and solar. Now, under this new Public Act, AMA is going to govern a whole lot more. It is going to be our guide for construction and deconstruction standards, which we previously had our own set of rules, and now everything has to be in line with what the AMA requires. So we will be defaulting to the AMA for a lot of those issues. Drainage, vegetation, things of that nature. Under the additional terms and conditions section, that this kind of covers a few miscellaneous items. It does allow us to still hire professional engineers to help us with review of the application, construction issues, anything of that nature. It does allow us to hire those third-party persons, and the applicant is then required to pay for those services. We did have that in our previous code, and that is something I'm happy to see we'll be able to keep going forward.
Alice, under 15, as-built maps and plans.
Yes.
Worst case scenario, project is complete. Will they get their operating permit prior to submitting those as-built plans? And if not, what is the recourse if they don't provide those plans?
So their operating permit, as far as I know, would be the same as a building permit. So once we give them their building permit and start construction, that's where we stop, correct? So typically, we build a lot of things in that they have to be in prior to the building permit. If these were not, this would put them in a position to have their special use revoked. So they would end up in a violation process that would give them 30 days to come into compliance. And then if they don't, then we could move forward with revocation.
Okay. I looked for that, but I couldn't, I didn't see it. Thank you.
Mhm. Does anyone else have any questions at the moment? The next half covers the operational standards. Again, we follow the template for this section. We do have a little bit more freedom with this section, is my understanding. I did attend a conference last Monday that was put on for the Illinois County Board Members Association, and that is who put out these templates. And since the Public Act addresses siting standards, that is covered by your design section. So they said, if we are looking to make any type of changes, we would probably have a little more freedom to do so under the operational section, as it should not affect the siting. So it's anything that affects siting, we cannot touch. But the other things, we're under the impression that those we might be able to work in our own type of rules, anything from our old ordinance that is legal and we want to carry forward. This is the section we would want to look at to do so. Everything is pretty much consistent with what we previously had. Recertification that covers what would be needed if they are replacing equipment versus repowering a project. The coordination with emergency responders is consistent with what we previously had. This does require them to train and supply equipment to local emergency groups, which is advantageous to us since we have a lot of volunteer fire departments in this area that may not have the finances to afford the equipment and or training. Water, sewage, material handling, storage, and disposal, that has not changed. They did add a requirement that they shall comply with the existing septic and well regulations as required by the county health department. While it is understood that they have to be in compliance with what the county requires, this does put it in writing and makes it clearer. The shadow flicker requirements have changed a little bit. We had some built-in protections for landowners receiving shadow flicker of 10 to 30 hours per year. We are now, I have the one threshold of a maximum of 30 hours of shadow flicker would be allowed per year. Anything after that, they would have to mitigate, whether that's with vegetation, awnings, things of that nature, or shutting down the turbine during those times. Signage has remained the same. The drainage systems has not. This section is actually causing some turmoil within the state because it conflicts with the state statute regarding drainage districts. So I understand that they are working at trailer bills, but it is unknown whether those will pass to address the drainage district issues that are existing. They do cover complaint resolution, which is consistent with what we had. The insurance is consistent with what we previously had. We had the 5 million for occurrence, 20 million in the aggregate. That has not changed. Under decommissioning, this is kind of one of the big sections because it requires us to comply with what the AMA requires for deconstruction or decommissioning. It is pretty consistent with what we required, but as far as the financial assurance and when those funds are paid, that will change. And I guess that's probably our concern is that with the AMA, they're not required to have those funds in place in full until the 11th year. And we had that set up that they would have those funds in sooner. So that's our concern with that. Otherwise, the AMA really does address a lot of what we had in our ordinance. Remedies section. I believe this is the section that addresses anything where they're not in compliance. So if they're failing to comply with anything that is required, this is where we go to look to how to address that. Fee schedule and permitting processes. As you'll see, there's some blanks in this section, and that's because I'm not sure how the county wants to address these. I'm hoping to have some input of anyone. I've looked at this from many different ways, and you know, the way that the language is written, I feel we could make the argument that what we're charging is consistent with similar uses in the county. And that's what they're looking to have us do. For Lee County, we've had turbines in our county for 20 years. I would like to keep our fees the same. That is up for discussion whether we can or cannot do that. I've looked at it from our solar standpoint. We charge $5 a kilowatt, 5,000 per megawatt. I would consider maybe doing something similar on the wind side, but I really need more input from the rest of my higher ups. Does anyone have any thoughts on that section?
So what we're charging for the wind and the solar is different?
No. No.
So by what megawatt, it's the same both? Well, good. Well, that seems.
Yes. So under the new Public Act, though, they want us to have it consistent with other uses of a similar district. And that's hard. We don't have, I have not been able to identify something, I guess it would be similar, other than maybe like a Met tower, radio tower, something like that. But I just really don't know where to go with this section at this time, so we are leaving those blank until we can get some more input.
Yeah, I don't know what else you could possibly,
A lot of, we were in an email group with other zoning administrators, and we've seen a lot, different calculation methods and whatnot. So we're just kind of looking for any and all input at this point, so. Same thing with the building permit fees. We'll probably look to do something similar, though, that'll be comparable between wind and solar. All costs to be paid by applicant or owners. So this is a section that kind of really helps us so that we can get the assistance we need for these big projects. If we need to hire an engineer, this is the section that allows us to be able to do so. The following section regarding the hearing facilitator is the exact language that came from our current ordinances. So there is no change there. I think they swapped the paragraph order, but other than that, it is the same. Under hearing factors, this is kind of tricky because what we are being told under this new public act is if they meet certain standards that are required, that we have to approve it. So we still have a duty to consider certain factors, though, as part of a special use hearing. Those being the findings of facts or LaSalle factors. So we're still being directed to consider these factors. However, they may not be able to impact our final decision. The revocation section does cover the revocation of any special use permit and the process of doing that. This is very handy. We're actually in the process of trying to revoke a special use permit for a turbine located along US Route 52. That was installed a very, very long time ago, and there is nothing in that ordinance from that time that covers revocation. So we're getting through that process, but it's not easy because we don't have that. So this spells out the process that we can follow and what we can and cannot do to be able to move forward should that be necessary. Transferability does require them to notify us of change of ownership within a certain amount of time that we have not had in the past. They typically do notify us at some point, but this actually gives them a time frame in which they must do so. And that pretty much covers the wind draft. Does anyone have any questions?
Back to the fee structure. How
Yes.
does that compare to the Chusa and Nelson power plants?
Oh, that's a good idea. I'll have to look into that.
Because it is a similar use of generating power.
Yes.
And I'd even go as far as Ogle County and what they do with the nuke plant.
Okay, I like that. Thank you. All right. Anyone else have any questions? You? Martha? You good? All right. You guys want to move on to solar?
Well,
Take a
let's-
break?
Yeah, I think that the suggestion has been made that we hold both of these over to next Monday. And-
Yes.
And then any input that anybody has for that, then we would approve or hopefully approve and send it on to the county.
Yes, that is
Do
the
we
plan.
need those fee structures completed in what we sent?
Yes, and so that is also why we would like to continue this out a week, is to allow us time to get those blanks filled in and then bring it back to you guys, and so that it can be heard in its entirety on the 10th.
Okay. Then we have the solar energy system ordinance.
Sorry. All right, again, a few more definitions. They're pretty much consistent with the changes to the wind section. And anywhere that, and I should have mentioned that earlier, I'm not sure if you're seeing any highlighted like up on the screen. Those are just where I have input information into blanks that were in the template, or language that I added to shore up what they had to make it consistent with what we've done previously. So that's just what that's telling you, is it's varying from the template. This is really similar to what was when, so we can probably move through this a little bit quicker. Everything is pretty much the same. Changes that we saw in wind here in the solar, the requirements are consistent with what we had in our current solar ordinance.
This is intended though for a commercial solar, not residential.
Correct. Anything that is producing electricity for off-site use. So currently, we have two ordinances here in Lee County. One is our solar energy system ordinance, and one is solar as an accessory use. So solar as an accessory use covers anyone that is using solar to be used on-site, and then the solar energy system addresses all commercial solar. So this ordinance will be replacing the commercial solar energy system ordinance.
Thank you.
Going through the design and installation, we're still requiring ANSI and UL compliance. The height has not changed, may not exceed 20 feet in height at full tilt. Vegetative screening is still a requirement. Our current ordinance had a bit of an elaborate vegetative screening plan. It gave people the option to have a vegetative screen or to accept a cash payment. I am looking into whether or not we would be able to continue doing that. And I think the key is, so long as it doesn't prevent them from moving forward with their project, that we could probably consider it. And that was basically if they met certain standards for what requires vegetative screening, an estimate would be done of what would be required to screen the project, and then the owner would then have the option to have the screen installed or to take a cash payment. We also had a third option: if they didn't respond, that they would automatically receive a cash payment. That third paragraph or third part where they get payment if they don't respond, I think that would probably give us the most headache going forward. So we may have to consider changing that to just where they would get the screen instead of a cash payment. Lighting has not changed. The following paragraph, intra-project power and communication lines. Paragraph I is what they proposed. When you look at our ordinance, we do grant our zoning administrator the authority to grant variances should the developer encounter bedrock, water courses, other elements that prevent them from burying lines. This is so that they don't have to go back through a hearing process just to get the okay to move forward. So I did add that in there. And then also we allowed for the lines not to be buried so long as they used a cable management system. So we did keep that consistent in this draft. Fencing, 6 feet to 25 feet. Now, at the conference I attended last week, the guy said anywhere up to 25 feet, and that we could probably reduce this amount to something that is more palatable. We had 6 feet, or if it was a chain link fence, and 8 feet if it was woven wire fence. So we will probably amend that to allow for the woven wire so long as it's 8 feet tall. And that would still be then consistent with what the state is requiring. The warnings has not changed. Setback requirements have. Lee County had it was essentially an 800 by 800 foot square setback around, centered on a home. It was square, it created a lot of setback, a lot of distance, a lot of protection. We no longer can have that, and it is now 150 feet to the nearest point of an outside wall of a structure for a occupied community building or non-participating residents. The boundary lines of a non-participating residence are 50 feet. So it's my understanding that whichever is greater, that is what they would abide by as far as the setback off the boundary line or the structure. The road use the road use section, as I explained, we are looking into whether Dave Anderson will be able to keep the language that he had previously proposed for our current ordinances. Noise level is the same. And again, we're back to the AMA, where that is going to again dictate the construction and deconstruction standards for the project. As-built maps and plans. In this one, I did add the Lee County zoning administrator and Lee County supervisor of assessment. I will add the same language to the wind draft as well, because the zoning office will need those documents as well as the assessment office to update their GIS maps. Engineering certificate is something we have always required. And again, the additional terms and conditions is similar to how it was drafted in the wind, giving us a few added benefits. Operation, does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry. Under the operations section, again, this is pretty much consistent with the wind draft and with the language that we had in ours. Same for coordination with emergency responders, the water, sewage, material handling, signage. Signage would be to also include the 911 address and 24-hour contact number at the facility entrances. It would also be something we would want for the wind towers as well. Drainage systems is consistent with the language they proposed for the wind. And again, there are some issues with that, but ultimately it defaults to what the AMA requires. The insurance section is the same as what Lee County has. The decommissioning and site reclamation, again, this will go to, we'll look to the AMA for dealing with all things construction, deconstruction, financial assurances, and whatnot. The remedies section is the same. The fee section is also the same. We're looking at the same questions. So I will be doing some research based on what Ben suggested to hopefully get further with that. Hearing facilitator section is the same. And the hearing factors are the same. The attorney that was at the conference last Monday, he did talk about LISA and soil scores. He said that we would probably have a better argument on the solar side for using land and soil scores as a way to, I guess, it's going to be a more useful tool for solar. Solar takes more cropland out of production. So if we are going to consider soil scores for these types of projects, we're probably going to look to the solar projects to take it more seriously, given the amount of acreage of farmland that they will take out. Now, as to whether that can impact our decision, that is still up in the air. But he said, you know, the argument could be made that, you know, if our farmland and ag is what our comprehensive plan is designed around, and these projects are impeding on our comprehensive plan, then this is where we would be able to possibly use that argument. But everything is so vague and it's not very clear what we can and cannot do. So I don't know how we'll move forward with that, but I did want to relay that discussion. Revocations is the same as is the remaining 3 paragraphs. And that is solar in a nutshell. Does anyone have any questions?
Back to the permitting fees, would it be possible, like what we discussed, what you were just saying is solar takes more ag land out of production versus wind. Can you develop your permit fees based not only on power produced, but acreage? As some sort of a formula?
Okay. I can look into that. Do you know of a situation, an example?
No?
Okay.
Just throwing an idea out there.
I like it. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns? Anything they feel wasn't addressed, should have been addressed, would like to see addressed?
Don't make the fees too cheap.
And essentially how the fees are probably going to work is that we'll require basically a retainer, essentially. Say they pay us $100,000, and then out of that $100,000, we'll pay out the facilitator fees, we'll pay out the board member wages, we'll pay out, you know, any expense that we have. If we hire any consultants, that'll all come out of there. And anything left over then will have to be returned to the company. We are going to have to keep very good accounting records of how we are using that money, as it is only supposed to be sent on the hearing of the application. So,
That'll be a nuisance, but
well, it'll be different. We have not operated that way previously. So it'll be a change. Yes.
These fees are a one-time thing then? And no matter how many megawatts, the max fee will be 100,000.
So we're looking at two different fees. One is the application fee and one is the building permit fee. So with the application fee, we'll charge a retainer essentially, and we'll deduct our costs out of that. And at the end of the public hearing, once the appeal time has expired, we will then return whatever's left to them. Then we have the building permit fee, and that is going to be a set fee that there is no refund, that they will pay a certain amount to the county in exchange for those building permits.
So these fees are the permit or the building?
Both. So one of the first section, I think the first, under section 10, fee schedule and permitting process, paragraph 1 is application fees, and that covers the fees for hearing of the application. So all of our costs associated with that hearing process will deduct from whatever fee we determine, and then we have to return anything left over that we don't use. If they say we charge them 100,000 up front and they end up spending 105,000, they will have to pay the difference to us for those fees. But if we have anything extra, we will have to return it to them. But then when you get down to paragraph 2, that is building permit fees. And so after the hearing process is finalized, they will come in and get all everything in order to receive their building permits, and they'll pay that fee at that time, and we'll keep that fee in whole.
I have a question.
Yes.
How close has any project come to that maximum?
The maximum, honestly, could not tell you. We've not had that previously. We've charged,
So the maximum is new,
yes.
that they want us to put a maximum in there.
That is what they're suggesting would be the easiest way to do it, is to charge an upfront amount that we can deduct from, so that we have the money when we need it to pay for those expenses. And then we can return anything at the end. So, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't ask earlier, do we have anybody by Zoom? No, thank you. So if we hold these over to Monday, that's the 10th, is
Mhm.
that right? 6:30?
Yes.
Is there any objection from members of the plan commission to that?
that's fine.
Should you
Okay.
put it into a motion to table it until?
Yeah, we better table it
Please.
so that we can bring it up at that point. Is there a motion to table? You want to do them separately or as joint?
She said separately, please.
Separately?
Yep.
Okay. Let's start with the wind, which is 23 PC 70. Is there a motion to table that?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. And 23 PC 71, the Solar Energy Systems. Carry that over to the 10th.
So move.
Second,
Thank you. Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion is carried. Anything else to bring before the commission at this point? As always, a motion to adjourn is in order. Motion to recess, okay. Technicals. Gonna get technical. So, motion to recess to April 10th at 6:30. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
second,
And seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, the same. Motion is carried. We are adjourned.